Howdy!
Howdy.
Howdy!
Howdy!
Howdy.
Howdy from the campus of Texas A&M University here at the Leach Teaching Gardens.
Hi, everybody. Wow, here we are, the last day of our virtual annual conference, Recrafting Gardens for a Changed World. We made it to the last day, and it seems like we're doing great, and we hope you are too. It's been an incredible experience for us to connect with you over the last several weeks as we've come together as an industry and joined together and proved that we can be resilient in changing times. As you know, throughout the conference, we've been running a campaign we call 9,700 Strong. This campaign is there to help our gardens and our over 9,700 members stay connected, engaged, and thriving over the coming years as we achieve resilience from COVID-19. Let's go over to Joan, who'll show us the campaign thermometer, and we can see just how far we are. Joan?
Let's see where we are today. Thank you so much. Please follow the links on our dashboard to donate. We'll have this running all week. And don't forget the amazing PlantSnap offer for a free, unlimited term upgrade to the Pro version of the PlantSnap app for donations of $20 or more. You can find out more about this partnership in our Partner Spotlight on the conference website.
This is an amazing outpouring of generosity. We are so thankful to all of you who generously contributed to the campaign. As an association, we are honored by your support. We are so honored to have not only your treasure in this capacity, but always your time and your talent. And we hope that you seek during these times when we need to stay connected more than ever, different ways that you can stay even more highly engaged in our association. There are some amazing service opportunities that we have, from community chairs to committee members, even up to board service. We really hope that you'll consider.
Hello from Denver Botanic Gardens. We love our community of public gardens and wish all of you a great conference.
For well over a decade, the American Public Gardens Association and the United States Forest Service have been proud partners. We're partners in conservation, we're partners in stewardship, and we're partners in resilience. And we share common goals. State and private forestry shares a goal of connecting forests to people. And in a world where we connect our gardens to people, you can see how much we share. State and private forestry is where communities, the forest, and people intersect, and they intersect for the ecological, social, and economic benefits for all of America. Here, with a special welcome on the last day of our conference, is John Phipps, Deputy Chief for State and Private Forestry for the USDA, U.S. Forest Service.
Hello, everyone. What a terrific job you've undertaken for the past few months under extremely difficult and rapidly changing circumstances. You're dealing with the uncertainty and the health risks of the coronavirus with your families and in your communities. This really is one of the toughest situations we've ever seen. And this is challenging for all of us. You are not alone. We are all in this together, and we will support each other. Yet, despite all that is going on, I'm grateful for seeing your terrific resiliency. We thank the APGA and their enduring support and to make this year's virtual conference a success with over 1,300 attendees, achieving the highest attendance of any previous conference.
From Sherman Library and Gardens in Newport Beach, California, we want to wish you a great virtual conference.
Now, before you start getting used to all these virtual conferences, just know that we have our sights set on a time in the not too distant future in which we can all come together again. Because, as you know, that's one of the most valuable things about our conference. Am I right? So our planning for the 2021 conference came together starting about 18 months ago, and we are pleased to team up with 3 fabulous gardens, and they are thrilled to be your host. So without further ado, let's go see where we're going to go in 2021.
My name is Mary Brenniger, and I'm President and CEO of the Dallas Arboretum. What a year each one of us have had. But it has proven many things to us, and that is that people value public gardens. It's a place for refuge for many, a place for beauty, but also a place for discovery. We look forward to having you in Fort Worth and Dallas as we all discuss together how we move forward in today's times.
Hi, I'm Ed Schneider, President of the Botanical Research Institute of Texas. I want to give a quick shout out to APGA. A great job pivoting and creating this virtual conference for all of us. These are certainly challenging times that call for innovative solutions. We can't wait to see all of you in 2021 here in the Fort Worth, Dallas area to talk more about the future of gardens and arboreta, a future that will surely require more innovative thinking.
Hi, everybody. I'm Bob Byers, the director of the Fort Worth Botanic Garden. Before we launch the video, we wanted to share with you that when the marketing committee developed the theme of New Frontiers, Rising from Roots for next year, it was pre-COVID. It was meant to be a segue into thinking about the gardens of tomorrow, about how they will change. Well, change is here, and we're embracing it. Our gardens will rise from our roots and we will flourish. So, here's a big Texas invitation to visit us next year.
Hi, everyone. I'm Casey Sklar. I'm the Executive Director of the American Public Gardens Association. I want to talk to you about two things today that are extremely important. And if you are a numbers-driven person like I am, these next few minutes are going to really, really, really be great for you. But it's also important for the rest of you, whoever you are, wherever you work, at a garden, or even if you're a supporter of gardens. I want to talk about the lost spring. We've told you many, many times during the last few weeks about how we want this virtual conference, Recrafting Gardens in a Changed World, to reflect a new reality that we all live in. And that said, it's really important to look back a little bit and look forward a little bit at where we've been and the prospects ahead of us as we go through a very long and slow reopening process. Beginning on March 11th, the public horticulture industry pivoted from being a place where people went for safety and reflection in the midst of an ongoing pandemic to seemingly overnight having gardens closed one right after the other. From our first survey that we conducted, we saw with almost 400 gardens responding that 60% of our members were totally closed. And 36% remained a little bit open, but only 4% of gardens remained fully open to the public. And if you look here, you can see that that impact is more profound than that. It was literally overnight. In 2 weeks, and in most cases within 5 days, 70 to 90% of our members closed. They did it because it was the right thing to do. They did it because they were doing it in response to direct mandates. 3 out of 4 of them said that. And at the end of that period of time, only 7 of 75 of the largest gardens in the country remained open in some form or another. And that's continued for the past 4 months. Later today, we're going to hear about those 7 gardens in a session called How They Did It. And it's a really important lesson for any garden that's going through the process of reopening, and we hope you'll stick around for it. So let's look at where we are today. 4 months later, our industry is starting to get back on its feet, and many of our member gardens are in some form of process of reopening. And that means different things to different gardens, different challenges, and different opportunities. Let's face it, we now have a new slew of adjectives to be able to describe what's happening to all of us. And you can pick your favorite, or in my case, I'll pick all the ones I hate the most. But the fact remains that our most recent survey that we did in late June paints a different picture of our industry. It's a lot more of a complex picture right now. So I'm sharing the latest from our June 30th survey with you. There's good news and there's bad news. The good news is that over half of our member gardens are reopened or are planning to reopen. And what do we mean by reopening? Because that's not necessarily everything it's cracked up to be. The bad news, though, is that almost 20%, about 17% of our gardens still remain fully closed. And these gardens have been closed well over 3 months, with the longest closure being 120 days at the end of June. And then 10% of those gardens are now what we call fully open. All facilities open, all programming resumed, everything else. But that's just 1 in 10. And so that doesn't mean that everything's back to normal. Fully open doesn't mean that we have the same visitor capacity. Fully open doesn't mean that programming has resumed as normal. And so let's look at the impacts of revenue. First, our March survey looked at all the various forms of economic impacts that we were seeing. Education events, ticketed events, weddings, other functions, galas, contributed income, all these things evaporated overnight. We estimated through our benchmarking platform that collectively we were losing $3 million a day in earned revenue in the public horticulture industry. And meanwhile, That platform gave us estimates that we all were spending $1.2 million a day just in horticulture and facilities expenses alone to keep our priceless living collections active and activated. So why do I say all this? I say it because advocacy is truly important. Advocacy first is about action. For some reason, it seems like we're not getting the attention in our industry, the specific, narrow attention that we need to keep our gardens whole for the vast majority of gardens. Some have qualified for lifeline loans, but many have had no restitution or no means of support through this. I want you first to know that in terms of action, we've also formed alliances. Our alliances with our museum sector CEOs and those organizations, the American Association of Museums, the American Association for State and Local History, the American Association of African Museums, the Association of Art Museum Directors, the Associations of Zoos and Aquariums. I can go on and on. Those collective alliances have meant a lot, and they've helped us get some relief in the form of grants when we've been speaking collectively. And we have plans to continue to speak collectively. But it isn't easy. And when we look at revenue right now, we're seeing dramatic impacts. We know that over half our gardens report drop-offs in earned revenue of over 50%. We know that 10% of our gardens have seen a near 100% drop-off of earned revenue. Only 6% of our gardens reported their revenue remaining the same as before the pandemic. And it's not going to get better anytime soon. Most of you think it's going to take over a year before we recover. Almost another third say it's going to be at least 6 months. So that means almost 80% of us don't think it's going to get better for our industry. And that's also coupled with the fact that we know that the Paycheck Protection Program, small business economic injury disaster loans, some of those things have helped some of us, but nothing has helped all of us. But we, as an association, are still trying. Not only are we banded together with our museum sector associations to make sure that Congress, the House of Representatives, and the Senate hear our collective requests, but as an association, we're also using an action-driven, data-backed proposal to the Senate and to Congress that is specific for botanic gardens. And it is based on that $1.2 million in horticulture and facilities expenses alone. That makes up only 27% of what the average expenses of a garden is. So it's a conservative, narrow ask to get $130 million directed solely for botanic garden relief. That number may go up the longer we stay closed, but it's something we're not backing away from. I know you haven't heard about it. I understand. That's our intention. We want to make sure that this is a surgical approach to relief specific for our gardens. If you've helped support that, I thank you. If not, your chance will probably come soon, but you can always advocate to your state and local representative on behalf of the economic impacts that you're seeing to your industry. Because the A in advocacy is about action. The B in advocacy ABCs is benchmarking. I know that people have heard this from me before. I cannot emphasize how important it is that if your garden has not completed benchmarking, you need to do it. I know you feel you're asked to do surveys. I know that you're busy getting back into garden operations. This is critical. Please fill out benchmarking or go to your garden leader and ask them to do it for you. Together, we can tell stories. On behalf of all of us at the American Public Gardens Association, we are here for you in these unprecedented, challenging, whatever adjective you want to use. It's also a time of opportunity, and we hope that you take the opportunity to be connected and to enjoy the rest of our conference. Thank you.
Hello from the Elizabeth River Project.
In Paradise Creek Nature Park in Portsmouth, Virginia.
Throughout the conference, we've had several other preferred partners who've led efforts. The first one of those that I'd like to recognize today is Bartlett Tree Experts. Bartlett Tree Experts has sponsored our opening reception for many, many years. They're a longtime sponsor and supporter of the association, and we're so pleased that they've invested this year on a whole new level, providing resources and tips for you to better care for your trees, as well as a vast array of other support provided to our gardens. Scott Jameson, who you know well, currently serves as a director at large on the board of the American Public Gardens Association. He, along with Greg Page, who's been active in plant collections for our association for many, many years, are not just members, they're valuable allies and voices on behalf of all of our members.
Trees and time cannot be replaced. You can build a bigger house, you can add an add-on to a garage per se, but you can't replace that 100-year-old tree. People really relate to their trees. They understand the importance of them, and that's what feeds me is the passion that clients have for the trees. So that really drives me to do whatever I can, the best I can, to make sure that those trees are safe and also can live for generations. Okay, well, I'd like to start off with doing a soil sample so we can find out exactly what type of soil we're working with. We have this research facility that we can send information to. So something that I thought was going on with the plant in particular, I sent it off to our lab, and it's extremely comprehensive how they do their analysis. The science is the basis for what we do every day, and if we don't have science, we can't really make a good, proper diagnosis, just like your doctor.
It may be a tree that you'd want to consider taking out in the longer run. The company's been going since 1907. We've got over 2,000 employees and offices in Canada, throughout the United States, in the UK and in Ireland. So we try to deliver the highest level of customer service that we can, from the point where the client rings the office all the way through to us phoning them when the job's been completed to ensure that they're absolutely happy with the service that we've given to them. People get comfort out of the fact that we've been doing the job for so long.
The reason why we prune trees is basically to keep the trees healthy. It could be as simple as removing dead hazardous branches because they might fall and break something or hurt somebody. But we can also help the trees to have better structures and be healthier, because trees in the city and the urban forest grow a little different than the trees in the forest. So we have to kind of guide them a little bit.
Every day that I go to work, I find something new that I love about what I do. As a plant health care specialist, I visit multiple properties in a day, and when I get to a property, I look at all the different species on the property. I diagnose insect, cultural problems, and disease problems on site, and I treat accordingly. I also take soil samples and plant samples, and if there's an unfamiliar pest or disease that needs to be treated, we'll have them sent down to the diagnostic lab in Charlotte, North Carolina. So we're constantly learning about new pests and diseases and ways to help trees grow better. I love doing plant health care because you get to see the impact that you're making on a tree's health.
I love it when I'm able to take a tree that's overgrown and be able to walk away from it and have, some space between branching and have it lifted up off of the house. It feels good when you check in with a client at the end of the day and you're leaving their property and they have a smile on their face.
We're all about customer service. We're all about personal interaction. We're all about making sure that the client comes first and they understand that. You know, they're not just a number, not just a street address. They're somebody who has trees that they care about.
Every tree needs a champion.
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 Hello from the West Virginia Botanic Garden in Morgantown.
Hi, everyone. As an association, when the staff and the program selection committee were planning the virtual conference, above all, we wanted it to be relevant, not just to the public horticulture industry, but in the theme of our conference, Recrafting Gardens in a Changed World, we wanted it to be relevant to the circumstances we found ourselves in, especially since March when the world changed in the COVID-19 pandemic. When we first conducted membership surveys in March and April, they illustrated that over 96% of our gardens were closed in some way, shape, or form. Our benchmarking data from the time showed immense losses, collectively $3 million a day being lost in earned revenue, while still gardens were spending $1.2 million a day in horticulture and facilities expenses alone, just to care for the plant material. Our surveys also showed that about 1 in 4 gardens only had any sort of visitor accessibility in any way, shape, or form, not even including services, just gates open for people. And of the country's 75 largest institutions, all but 7 were completely closed to visitors during the pandemic. We have representatives of those 7 gardens here with us today to talk about how they did it and the lessons that they learned while they were remaining partially open. These lessons are immensely useful for any garden that's in any phase of reopening. So please join me in welcoming Adrienne Nakashima, Ned Friedman, Michael DePlane, Christopher Dunn, Paige Hayhurst-Kinnery, Richard Schuloff, and Kathleen Sokolowski and the UC Davis crew who will tell us how they did it.
Hi, I'm Ned Friedman, and I'm the director of the Arnold Arboretum of Harvard University, and I want to welcome everyone to this session. This small group of directors and CEOs of botanical gardens and arboreta came together in the midst of a pandemic when we discovered that most gardens, probably for legal reasons and a variety of other reasons, were shutting down and were closed, and we discovered that there were a small number of us that were still open for business. And we are a very diverse group of gardens and arboreta. Some of us are very large properties, some of us are smaller properties, some of us have a gate, some of us don't have a gate, some of us have bathrooms, some of us don't have bathrooms. But in a wonderful way, we ended up getting together and meeting every week or two on Zoom to talk about the challenges of trying to be there for the world to come to a public space that is green, that is nurturing, that allows for reflection and for a sense of well-being. And in many ways, I think all of us came to appreciate what an extraordinary experience it's been to be able to serve so many people. So we have Christopher Dunn, we have Richard Schulhoff, Michael, Adrian, Paige, and one person who's not with us, but I'm going to try to represent a little bit, is Kathleen Sokolowski of the University of California, Davis Arboretum. Because she and I ended up, because of the similarity of our institutions, we're basically gateless. We have no way of closing to begin with, and we are very much public parks as well as essentially controlled arboreta. We ended up exchanging everything from signage and communications materials to just becoming a little bit more connected around our mission. And I remember Richard actually talking about the details of what it means to have carriageways, to have wide lanes that allow you to move through. And Adrian, every one of us has essentially come through this pandemic with, I think, a renewed sense of the deep importance of gardens, public gardens and arboreta for society. And I'll just mention a couple of quick things that happened at the Arnold Arboretum. Quite amazingly, we'd just gotten our first gate counter. We have 12 major entrances. And in the months of April and May, we hosted more than 250,000 visitors on the grounds safely. Our staff is at half staff on the grounds, but they worked tirelessly not only to make sure that the grounds looked amazing, but they also were able to add 350 new accessions to our living collections of over 16,000 organisms. We removed our trash barrels because we didn't want to expose our own staff, and we used signage to get community buy-in that we are all responsible for this arboretum to keep it clean. And I can tell you today, if you walk in the arboretum at Harvard in Boston, 99+% compliance around facial coverings. So we've created a space where I think a lot of people come because they feel safe, safer often than other spaces. And I have never received so many emails and communications about how important it has been to find some refuge, some place to restore, to renew one's energy, and to connect with the beauty of the world when there is so much ugliness otherwise. And this goes obviously beyond the pandemic of a virus. It goes to the pandemic of racism now. And I think more than ever now, we need to be spaces that are really part of society's discussions of how to make the future better. So I'll stop there, but this is what it's meant to me, and I know a number of my colleagues. My great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Christopher Dunn, who is the Executive Director of the Cornell Botanical Gardens.
Well, thank you, Ned, and thank you and Adrian for organizing this session. All of us at Public Gardens are well aware of the health benefits, physical, emotional, and psychological of nature and of gardens and gardening. And Ned alluded to that in his introduction. And we actively promote this to our members, donors, and funders. And in the aftermath of 9/11, many of us experienced significant increases in visitation, membership, and financial support. And I would say that at that time, our value to our communities was never more evident until now. And now, in this time of COVID-19, gardens that have remained open are experiencing the same thing again, as my fellow panelists here can and will attest to. So we are doing everything possible to ensure that our visitors have a pleasant, meaningful, impactful, and safe experience. And we go to great lengths to ensure this. And we also engage most of our staff in developing plans, signs, safety protocols, and the like. But what we spend far too little time on, in my opinion, is ensuring the well-being of our staff. We're focused on the visitors. The irony here is that we extol the virtues of gardens and gardening and nature to our visitors, but we do precious little to make sure that our staff receive those same benefits. So this is one critical aspect, I think, of remaining open and of reopening. And there are several aspects of this to consider. First, our staff are on the front lines. They're the ones that are interacting with visitors, whether they want to or not, and not knowing if the visitors are contagious or symptomatic or asymptomatic or not. And as long as visitors are being compliant, as they seem to be at Arnold, with respect to wearing face coverings and physical distancing and the like, things seem to be okay. But it's still stressful because it's unknown for the staff. They want to interact with visitors, that's what they do, but they can't. And they may want to tell visitors, hey, please put on that face mask, but don't feel empowered or safe doing so. So that's one thing. The second thing here at Cornell anyway, we are not permitted for now to use volunteers, nor can we hire students or seasonal workers. So therefore, our staff don't have all the human resources that they are accustomed to. So that gives them additional stress because now they feel that they cannot maintain their personal professional standards of care. They have pride in their gardens, but they don't have the person power that they need in order to affect that. So they have great pride in their work, but they don't have the resources necessary to have the gardens looking as great and as beautiful as they want. So on the one hand, they want to be at work. They love being at work. On the other hand, it's enormously stressful and they feel at risk. And the third part of it is just this insecurity that everybody's feeling these days. Uncertainty around job security, family issues, if they have both parents working and they've got kids at home, and other personal stresses. So we need to be mindful of the stress that our staff are under. So some of the things that we are doing is just meeting by Zoom every week on Monday morning, 30 minutes, share concerns, share silver linings. We make resources available online for emotional health and that sort of thing, counseling. I do a lot of listening, and I'm constantly reminding my staff and myself that we can only do the best we can under the circumstances, and that this is temporary. We provide all the safety equipment they need. We go overboard if necessary. And I will say that this experience has made me a much more empathetic leader, at least as empathetic as Scotsman can be. So my take-home message is put the staff first, take care of them, honor them, tell them you love them, then they will be in a much better place to take care of the gardens, the visitors, and themselves. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to our next speaker. So in staying open, another area to consider is how your operations appear to the public at a time when most things may be closed. So here to speak about the impact of PR and marketing on your organization is Richard Schulhoff from the Los Angeles County Arboretum in California.
Thank you, Christopher. Richard Schulhoff at the LA County Arboretum, and I'm here to tell you about our experience with public communications during the pandemic. Like all public gardens in the country, we faced a major decision whether or not to stay open. Everything around us was locking down, and in fact, many of the nonprofits around us locked down very, very quickly. And two factors drove our decision to stay open. One, our staff almost immediately began developing protocols, adaptations that would allow us to provide all of the safety precautions and remain open for our visitors. And they did that on their own initiative. So that was a major factor. And second, we realized that the configuration of our landscape, our circulation systems, could accommodate social distancing for relatively large numbers of people, and that in fact, we could remain open for our community. The first weeks of remaining open, we had huge outpouring of gratitude and thanks from our community, from our visitors, from our members. But then about early April, we began getting phone calls, expressions of concern, anger, and even outrage from people who believed that we were a threat to public health. I had people calling me on the phone and screaming into the receiver. And this had gone on about a week, and our communications team swung into action and created a very simple messaging program. And it all boiled down to two messages. The Arboretum is essential. It's more essential now than ever. The experience of our landscape mitigates stress. People need exercise. And of course, you have all the documented healing powers of nature. And then the other point to be made, of course, is that the Arboretum was safe. Our staff team had done such a phenomenal job in putting precautions in place. And I honestly believe that at this point in time, the Arboretum was probably one of the safest outdoor environments in Los Angeles County for the general public. And again, that's a salute to our staff team. And also, I have to say that the media stepped forward, and I can't say that we claim credit for this. What happened was that we discovered that among our members, there were several reporters for newspapers and local TV stations. And one of them called me early one Sunday morning, and she provided this report.
Social distancing is a big part of this. They're also staggering the entries, and you have to do it by reservation. Here's how they're doing it.
Well, we love you. Thank you. Here you go. I got another.
Getting water on a hot day at the Los Angeles Arboretum. LA County allowing it to open in a limited way during the COVID-19 epidemic.
We restrict the number of people who can come here. That's very important. You have to have advanced reservations, and that allows us to maintain appropriate social distancing.
Water fountains are off limits, as are benches. Visitors have to stay on the paved road. The dirt walkways are closed off.
Thing is that we have 2.5 miles of roads here, 18 to 20 feet across. And very few gardens have that. So that's really what allows us to be open and accommodate the distancing requirements.
On the phone, Park and Rec officials explained this is a perfect example of how other large public areas can be open to the public, comparing the scene at the Arboretum to some of the open beaches this weekend. Right now, people can use LA County parks, except for those that serve as trailheads, because those are hard to monitor with staff in carts like they do at the Arboretum.
Hi folks, how are you?
County officials add that what people are doing here is considered essential for the physical and emotional well-being of quarantined residents.
We've been cooped up for so many weeks. The kids have been homeschooling and they haven't left the house and been out to enjoy this beautiful sunshine. So to come out here in a space where you're safe.
We feel almost like unbelievable that, we're out and we actually went into a paid ticket venue. Like, we thought it was impossible, so we just really feel relieved today.
We are stuck in our house all day and it's super hot, but yeah, it's really nice to be outside finally.
Following that television coverage, we received additional newspaper articles, we got some TV coverage, and by the way, all the photographs I'm sharing with you in this presentation are courtesy of the Los Angeles Times. Early on, we began recognizing that there was this wonderful outpouring of thanks and appreciation for the Arboretum staff. People were coming in and seeing everything they were doing to make their visit possible. And we recognized that it was very appropriate for us to very publicly celebrate and congratulate our team on what they'd done through the pandemic. So in the period from March 15 to April 30, we had the online salute to our staff, which was sent out to a very broad community, and another appeal as well. And during that period, despite the fact that there was a 56% decrease in our visitation due to the need to accommodate distancing, we saw a 20% increase in total donation revenue. But what's really important is a 900% increase in the number of gifts. So that's literally hundreds of new members coming into our community of support, so important to our future and to our mission. And then in May, momentum was kind of building here, more and more people becoming members. And in May, we had the largest month of new member acquisition in our history. And by the end of the month of May, our total number of member households was the largest in the history of the institution. So I think coming out of this pandemic cloud, we recognized that the great silver lining was this broad community recognition in our region that nature matters and that places like the LA County Arboretum and other public gardens are more important than ever. And with that said, I'm going to turn it over to our next speakers, Paige Kinnery of the Brook Green Gardens and Michael Desplaines of the Norfolk Botanic Garden, who are going to talk about development and events and programs.
Well, thank you for that introduction, Richard. Paige and I are going to talk about events and staying open. Before we have our conversation, I wanted to just address leadership quickly. A lot of people have asked, how did you make the decision to stay open and what guided you in that? And I think for me, it was these three leadership concepts that I've learned about over the course of my career that have really stuck with me. One is from the book Great by Choice, which was a 2011 book by Jim Collins and Morton Henson that talks about these three things that help you be great by choice. And one is productive paranoia, empirical creativity, and the third is fanatic discipline. And productive paranoia, for me, is really key. What it states, and I'll actually read you their definition, it's the ability to be hyper-vigilant about potentially bad events that can hit your company and turn that fear into preparation and clear-headed action. You can't sit around being fearful, you must act. It's sort of the opposite of waiting for the other shoe to drop. Like when the other shoe drops, you already have the plan, you already know what you're gonna do. So productive paranoia, and I highly encourage you to get the book, or Harvard Business Review has an article on it too, Great by Choice. The second concept that I wanted to talk about is something that I learned a long time ago also from Harvard Business Review, which was from Jeff Bezos. Love him or hate him, what he's created is pretty amazing. he talks about asking 3 questions whenever he's going to make a decision or when he thinks about a new concept or new idea. And those 3 questions are so simple but so powerful and can help drive your decision making, I think, to a better place. He asks these 3 questions whenever he's going to start something. Why, what if, and how? And to me, that's, in a nutshell, that is leadership. Why are we doing it this way? Or why can't we do it this way? What if, and then fill in the blank, we did it that way or did something different? How would we go about doing that? So whether it's you internalizing that as a leader and asking that question of yourself or directing your staff teams, it's been an invaluable tool for me. And the third is something that I learned a long time ago when I started my nonprofit career in the 90s with the YMCA. YMCA is a massive organization. They're one of the top fundraisers in the country. They work with kids and adults year-round, 7 days a week. High risk, right? Swimming, childcare, summer camp, physical fitness, a lot of high-risk stuff. But yet, they remain a pretty risk-free environment. You don't often hear of a lot of disasters at YMCAs. They're really, really good about risk management. And one of their mantras is manage risk, don't let risk manage you. Figure out how to manage the risk at hand, whether it's opening a new exhibit, a children's garden, keeping the splash pad open, or staying open in a time of a global pandemic. How do you manage that risk and not let it manage you? It would have been much easier for all of us to stay home and say, you know what? The easier decision, close. We're just going to stay closed and we're just going to stay home because it's easier. But in that way, did we utilize productive paranoia? Did we ask the questions, why, what, if, how? And did we let risk manage us rather than managing the risk that we have? And I'm happy to say that all of us in our group didn't do that. And we feel we made the right decision in staying open. And I think the hundreds of thousands of people who visited us also would say that we've made that right decision. Paige made an interesting decision in her facility, which was she had a very expensive, very high ticket, big event that was going to open during COVID. And she decided to, again, manage the risk, not let risk manage her, and to keep that big exhibit open. So Paige, tell us a little bit about that. What was the exhibit, your decision-making behind it, and what have you seen as a result?
Absolutely. Thanks, Michael. Yes, our exhibit was Bruce Monroe. So everybody knows about this British light installation artist. It's something we'd been planning for 2 years. And like many other organizations had, a very well-established holiday event during Christmas and the holiday season. And we wanted to complement that with summer hours, knowing even, particularly in our area, we were going to be open very late. So our exhibit is open till 11 o'clock. And we had made a lot of transitions in our operations to get to the point where we had been comfortable with that operational plan. All of our staff was actually very anxious to open on schedule, which was initially going to be April 1. So having remained open throughout the pandemic, it would have been possible for us to do that at that time. However, we also did a little bit of intuiting about what was happening in our community and whether it felt right. And I think that's another really important part of leadership, is listening to your community, listening to your volunteers and your staff, and making sure and bringing people along with you. So we had an excellent response in remaining open in our community, particularly when the beaches were closed. That's our primary source of entertainment, and our community was so very grateful, as in others, to have the resource and used us like a park, which was unusual. We had to adjust to some of the behaviors that we typically stop, like Frisbee and sunbathing. But in this case, we thought this is our best way to serve the community right now, and that was really important. When it came time to make the decision about opening the exhibit, there was much more comfort in us being open. We had established a policy about our, using our COVID bot on our website of people pre-purchasing tickets, and all of our sanitation being very well publicized. So I think all of those things, our community, our local community was very comfortable. Of course, this was one of the first places in the Myrtle Beach area that sees 9 million tourists a year. And we obviously had planned this event for tourists. So we also had to prepare for what that was going to feel like with people coming from other areas. And that was happening as soon as March, with people who have second homes and even people who are renting beach houses through Airbnb and other places. So we got sort of a warm up with some of those early visitors. And then when the hotels reopened, we began to see much of our regular tourism coming from the New York, Philadelphia area. The nice thing about those areas is having been so much on lockdown, way more than it was in South Carolina, is they were used to those protocols. They were expecting them, and seeing us all in our masks and seeing our protocols was part of their norm. And they actually helped some of our locals who had gotten a little complacent. I think we all do, where we sort of forget to wear our masks all the time, and especially when the sun is shining and it's 90 degrees outside. But that helped us to be vigilant. The other thing I did, and we talked a little bit about this in planning for all of our future holiday season events and how we're going to manage the risk there and the populations that we normally have for those events, is we had a lineup, and we had a socially distanced lineup with lots of staff and volunteers working the line, talking to people through our masks, talking to them about where they were from, talking to them about what was going to happen when they got into the exhibit. And it really set the tone. And I think people are used to waiting in lines now. And even though we really didn't have to do that in the exhibit, we created a one-way so that we could prevent a lot of interaction. And we eliminated all of our food and things so we prevented any of that gathering. But just having that lineup, I think, really set the tone for us, and really focusing people on advanced purchasing. It made everything run incredibly smooth. So I know you had some exhibits or some programs kind of going on too with your plant sale, and you did that mostly online, right, Michael?
Yeah, we did a really quick, I call it the 2 Ps, plan and pivot. I think we've all been doing that throughout. And the pivot for the plant sale was, I've got 6 figures worth of plants that I need to get rid of, or I'm going to have to babysit them till the fall. So the staff very quickly, in about 2 weeks, turned it into an online plant sale with scheduled pickup times. And we found that actually sales increased. I think that whole, when you buy things online, sometimes you spend more than when you were in the store and you see how much is really in your cart. So we found that it was really beneficial for us. The other thing I wanted to point out, Paige, that you mentioned is setting the expectation. I think you guys did a really good job at that. If you clearly define expectation for visitors before they get there, then there's no surprises. People get it. And they choose to come to you, right? It's a decision they make. So if they come to you, you've told them ahead of time what to expect, it's a great experience. And I think you guys knocked it out of the park on that.
Well, and we changed some of our advertising too, talking about pivoting and really putting that focus on where our audience was. We took down a lot of our very marketing-focused promotional Monroe exhibits. Billboards in particular is the main way that we advertise those. And we went to a very, we are here for you, with pictures of people socially distancing in the garden. And they got a very good response from people. It gave everyone a good sense of comfort. We found we didn't have to have those, as many of those marketing positions out there. We also had, and I hear from others that you have as well, a wonderful editorial. We had a great Post and Courier article about the Bruce Monroe as well, that was talking about if there is a medium for this time in our world, it is light. And that was such a heartwarming way to put the focus of that exhibit. And our local paper also said, he was getting, art sections from the New York Times getting thinner and thinner. And it was so exciting to him that Brooklyn was able to put forth this incredible art event in the garden. And having those editorials on your side and promoting that aspect of your interface and your inspirational, interface with your public, I think is especially important, coming from those trusted sources.
Great. Paige, it's a great segue now for me to introduce our colleague at South Coast Botanic Garden in California, Adrian Nakashima, who's also done a fantastic job of staying open and being beneficial and of service to hundreds of thousands of people on the West Coast. So with that, I'm going to introduce Adrian.
Well, thank you, Michael and Paige and my colleagues for sharing your experiences. You've heard us take some time here to share what we've been through since early March. We can collectively agree that the road to staying open was not an easy one to take. From Ned at the Arnold Arboretum and Kathleen at UC Davis Arboretum talking about how to shift and welcome the public, all while figuring out how to keep everyone safely distanced. To Christopher at Cornell Botanic Gardens and sharing the realities of keeping a workforce safe and engaged. To Richard at the LA County Arboretum, who had the challenges of dealing with the press and public scrutiny when hundreds showed up to seek the refuge of open space. To Michael at Norfolk and Paige at Brookgreen, who talked about managing risks and looking ahead at what an exhibit might look like as we recover and reopen. What we can also share are the hundreds of letters, emails, and social media posts we've collectively received from across our institutions, thanking us for staying open, thanking us for being a reminder of how important open space is, and highlighting something we all know, that nature is essential. As leaders in this crisis during the pandemic, we've had to come from an emergency phase, having to stabilize our organizations, to this next phase, what I like to refer to as this adaptive phase. And it's in this phase we've realized that now that our organizations have had to live in a new normal of facial coverings, distancing, and sanitizing. How do we now not only survive, but thrive in this new reality? We've all had to become adaptive leaders and take this moment for what it presents us with. Maybe it's the opportunity to play a leadership role in your own city or county's larger reopening discussions. For example, I was recently appointed to the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors, along with other community leaders, to the county's Los Angeles Economic Resiliency Task Force, specifically in the arts and culture sector. Together, what our group is doing is we're helping make recommendations countywide that will help not only provide the guidance needed for our sector to reopen, but now to thrive in these new times. Or is it seizing the opportunity to hit your organization's reset button and rethink and rejigger how our organizations operate, the programs that we offer, and who we are in this new world? We are currently trying to do this with our volunteer program and our education programs as well. As a group of leaders who stayed open during this pandemic, what we can offer is this: that twists and turns are the only certainty. You as leaders in your respective gardens will require the skills tailored to an environment of urgency, high stakes, and the unknown. And in a world of unknowns, what we do know is that we are blessed with a community that really is there for each other. So much like our small group of gardens and how we work together on Zoom meetings and calls to navigate our different situations while staying open, we invite you to use the wonderful resources APGA has provided, along with all the collective experiences on the other side of these screens. Our contact information will be provided at the end of this presentation. Please don't hesitate to use us as resources for your reopening efforts as well. We really are all in this together.
Great. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you to all the panelists who provided us with the great content for this session. I've been looking at the Q&A and the chat, and we have a lot of gardens who are looking at their reopening either today or in the future. And so it's good to know that this information has been helpful. And thank you also to all the attendees who are joining us, over 225 of you. So this is great to see our colleagues, even though it's virtual. What I wanted to do also is maybe answer some of the Q&A. I know that we got one just almost as this session was ending. So I'd like to ask some of the panelists. There's a great question here about any negotiation process experience that any of you had with some of your local governments. Did any of us have to apply for the status of being an essential organization? So panelists, did anyone want to take that one?
We didn't have to negotiate with the government so much as to, or government body, we had to negotiate with the university to some extent, and then they negotiate with the government. New York State, like in almost every other state, when things closed down, would define essential needs in that state. And so within New York State, education was not essential, but agriculture, horticulture, and some of these other components related to the land and the landscape were considered essential, relates to agriculture and food and the like. We were able to convince the university and beyond the university that what we were doing was essential, not only because we were curating important collections which have teaching and research applications, but also everybody on the face of the earth, from CDC even to the White House, I'm sure, I think, believe that being outdoors is an essential activity to help cope with this. So it was fairly straightforward. I think it was pretty easy to make a pitch that who we are and what we're doing was an essential service to the community.
Yeah, and I would
just add.
Oh, sorry.
Just very quickly that at the LA Arboretum, we were declared essential by the County of Los Angeles, along with other public open spaces for exercise, the purpose of exercise, and also that we were in regular contact with the Public Health Department regarding our precautions early on when people were still figuring out what the right protocols were. So that conversation was ongoing for us.
Yeah, and I was just going to mention, so because the Arnold Arboretum is actually incorporated into the park system, Boston, it never closed except for children's gardens, things like that, where there was a lot of, risk of transmission. Our biggest challenge was that we had double and triple the number of people normally because everything else was closed. So that meant working with the city and the state to control parking, to get more law enforcement, just more coverage of the grounds. But slowly but surely we were able to do it. But there was never a question. It never came up that the Arnold Arboretum would ever close or curtail any of its activities. Every single square foot of the grounds has been open since 1872.
Thank you. I think another great question that we have some time to answer is from someone asking how some of our organizations managed any of our volunteers during the pandemic and what safety protocols we might have used then. So I know some of us did do that, and I'll let you jump in on this answer.
Well, I'm happy to start. At Brookgreen Gardens, of course, like most of you, we have elderly populations. So we really had to be sensitive to where they were in the pandemic and their comfort levels. So initially, while we left some of that volunteer assignment up to the departments where they normally do scheduling, we just did a lot more communication with our volunteers about how they were feeling, what we could do for them in providing PPE or other communications. And the question that had come up before about seeking permission from the state authority, we actually did that in part with the South Carolina, the governor's office, which went through Commerce, initially because it was another thing that would give the volunteers comfort that we were doing everything that we could do and that we were getting government okay for the status of remaining open. But we've certainly had to adjust some of the schedules, and I would say half of our volunteers have yet to return.
Well, I can say something about that too. In my recorded remarks, I indicated that we aren't allowed to use volunteers because the only people allowed to be working at the gardens or on campus are essential staff, and volunteers are by definition not staff. So we have since then developed a plan to reintegrate volunteers and indicating that we think they are essential, and many of them think they are as well. And if we're going to maintain our collections to the level that the university expects and the researchers and teachers and professors expect, we need the volunteers. So we have presented a plan that has a really scaled down volunteer program to the university, and we're still waiting for their approval of it.
Great. Okay, so another interesting question that came through, I know many of us are dealing with this as well, is about the face coverings. What are some challenges that some of you have had at your respective institutions, and how are you answering any pushback from guests that say, I'm not going to do a mask?
I will tell you, Brookgreen, and in our indoor spaces, like our gift shop, our gallery spaces, we're handing out masks at the door for free, disposable masks. And that really does, along with our county ordinance, which is posted right next to where the volunteers are handing out masks, really helps push the authority that in order to come inside, a mask is required. So we have really not have any issues because of that. And I think having that interface with a person with a mask on, handing you a mask for free, has really helped diffuse those situations.
Yes, I would second that. Having masks at your entrance available for those who say they didn't bring one. That way, everyone coming in is wearing a mask.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question. At the Arnold, we have a very small, visitor center. It's not central. We don't sell anything in it, but I won't be opening it until the vaccine is developed. So one of the things I worried about is that people just think if they're outside, they're safe without the mask. And there was a period of time, really at the height of the pandemic in Boston, when what really happened was community enforcement. Unfortunately, sometimes overly zealous and tense. But I continue to go onto the grounds, and it's exceedingly rare to see someone who doesn't have a mask. They may pull it down when they're really far from people, and then they pull it up when they get near you and if you're walking on one of the wide lanes. But I think that's going to be a challenge as the rates go down, as they are here. And it isn't really just about what I've written about and what our signage is about. It's not strictly about transmission. It's a gesture and a cue to other people on the grounds in the community that you respect them and want them to be safe, not you are the only one you're thinking about. So I would just tell every garden, one of the most important things is to get that so that there is a sense that 99% of the people, it really is the outcast who defies this sense of community and bond. And we did it with, I rented highway department signs. We had, huge letters. We put signage out. But the beauty is coming through it, people are behaving as well as I've ever seen at the Arnold Arboretum. So it's also an opportunity to move the needle in another direction.
Ned, everyone, thank you so much for this session. I can tell from our very excited questions and chats, folks are really interested in this topic. Please, everyone, continue this conversation as you'd like to on the live discussions platform. That will be up for a while, so please take advantage of that. If you weren't aware, we have 5 concurrent sessions coming up next. So we may need to just let you all rush off to read the descriptions if you haven't decided what you're going to go to. It's a wonderful lineup. And again, thank you so much to these panelists for a wonderful session today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great job.